I'm Stephanie McCullough. I've been a financial planner for almost 27 years. Women carry so much shame around money, and it's completely understandable, and it's needless. It's needless because we're all in the same boat. The money stuff, it does not come naturally to any human. There's a mountain of science proving that human beings are bad at it.
I am terrified of money. I have tried to dive into it, and I have tried to educate myself. So I will happily admit to being one of the people that's bad with it.
We're all bad at money. Money is just a tool. It's a means to an end. What do you want this money to do for you? If we're just looking at math and spreadsheets and investing, that's boring.
So much of what I do is sort of bringing the quiet parts out into the open. I like to say the quiet parts out loud. And there's so much around money that are quiet parts that we were taught that we're not supposed to talk about. And especially as women, we're not even supposed to bother ourselves with that. Or those women who do that, they're a special kind of woman. The women who are into money and math, even into math, and meant to be sort of either put on a pedestal or just sort of I don't want to, I could never even do that kind of thing. And I will admit, as I think a pretty highly intelligent person, I am terrified of money. I have tried to dive into it, and I have tried to educate myself. I mean, we're talking 20 years now. I've been in trying to do all this, and I get as far as the basics of how to earn it, how to save it, how not to spend it badly. But if you talk about investment and future and all of that, I'm lost. So I will happily admit to being one of the people that's bad with it. And that's why I wanted to have you on today, because I think not only in my work, but also just in my life, I'm, midlife too. I just turned 50. I'm surrounded by folks sort of from 35 to 65. And I feel like in that category, there are a lot of women that are either finding themselves on their own or realizing I need to know more about my future than I have up to this point. And so I was so excited to have you on here to ask you, what are the things that, in the next 40 minutes that you think are sort of the first things we need to go and look at as women who are trying to prepare for our own futures and take care of our own selves?
Yeah. The first absolute thing is that you're not alone, right? You feel like you struggle with this stuff. You feel like you're bad at it. You just can't get your arms around it. Most of the women out there feel the same way, but because we've been socialized that it's not polite to talk about money. Oh, and also we're not supposed to, admit when we don't know anything. So we don't realize that our friends and our neighbors and our colleagues are feeling the same freaking way that we are, that, we don't have our arms around it. I've held workshops in friends' living rooms where they invite a bunch of women and we just lay out some topics. It's not me lecturing at all. I'm let's talk about earning money. And then people share. And every single time we do it, at the very end, women are like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. I didn't know that so many other people felt like they didn't have their hands around it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's not that doesn't mean it's it can never happen or it's too late or,
Not at all. Not at all. Women carry so much shame around money, and it's completely understandable, and it's needless.
Yeah.
It's needless because we're all in the same boat. No one taught us this stuff, right? Women, our generation, we really didn't learn it in school.
No.
And yet we're thrown out. Yeah, exactly. In fourth grade, I had to write a check for $12 to get a drink from the water fountain. I remember that.
Exactly.
But they never taught us about personal finance. I've talked to people who graduated from some of the top business schools in the country. They never learned personal finance.
No, yeah.
They learned corporate finance. Nobody teaches us. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, our brains are wired to make money mistakes. So we shouldn't feel any shame about this stuff at all.
I remember when I started my practice, I completely reverted to freshman year of college economics class. That's how I knew how to do the finances of a business. And I thought, oh, I wonder why I've never thought of this when I'm doing my own stuff. I felt much more comfortable running the business and the finances of my business than I ever have running the finances of my house. And I run the finances of my house. So yeah. So, but that's because I had a class. I was in business school for 2 years, so I had a whole bunch of corporate money conversations, but never, Yeah. So the shame is, as you said, the shame is, pervasive and also completely unnecessary.
And shared, right?
Yes.
We're all in the same boat. I bet if you opened up to a couple other women, they'd feel very similar.
Yes.
And if they don't, and if they start shaming you about it, then shut down that conversation, go find somebody else.
Right. Right.
That's not who you need.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to be honest. A million years ago when I was doing freelance writing, I wrote about my own personal like experience paying off credit card debt that I had amassed
Cool.
a bunch of.
Yep.
Yeah. And it was on Huffington Post and like it got some play in the world and it was terrifying. And also I think there was one person. Actually, that's not even true. That wasn't even on that post. I was going to say I had one negative comment, but that was on a different one.
Yeah.
And I had zero negative. It was mostly people being like, thank you for this because we thought we were alone in it. So, you know, as much shame as we carry around, my personal experience is that nobody actually does that to us. We're sort of shaming ourselves with this expectation that we think we're supposed to have.
We do.
You know?
And, it's floating out there in the ether. I don't blame us for picking up the expectation either, right?
Sure.
Like it's out there. And I don't think my colleagues in the profession do a very good job of changing it either.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I'm not sure they do it for men either. Like there's this sort of like, we hold the keys to this information and we're happy to share this information with you, but
for a price.
Clearly you're not going to be able to do this job. Yeah. Like you need us to do this. I feel
Which
like
is baloney.
Yeah. They do that to my husband too. So it's not totally.
It's baloney.
Yeah. Yeah. So
and at the same,
And at the same time, what that felt important.
There's no shame in asking for help and support.
Yes.
You know, like my big motto is you don't have to know all the answers.
Yeah.
You have to know the questions to ask and have the guts to ask them.
Yeah.
So
second part.
You don't have to remember what a Roth IRA is. You just have to remember like, oh yeah, that means something. And I probably should look that up again. Like a lot of that stuff's Googleable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But figuring out which jobs you want different pots of money to do for you, like that's the stuff that you should be asking yourself, in my opinion. Like the mechanics of it, you can figure that all out.
Yeah. And I do think that you talked really quickly about money story. I think that we carry, I know, again, I'm speaking personally. I can't speak for anybody else, but, I didn't grow up with it. I didn't have it. I didn't have parents who had it. We had enough to pay the bills every month. And that was that.
Yeah.
And we worked in order to get that. That was the lesson that I learned about money. And so when I got older and, very fortunately had a partner who had a job that paid enough that we could start thinking about more than just our monthly bills, I had no idea what to do with it. And I also had this money mindset of like, well, this isn't going to last forever. So we should just spend it while we can, because certainly I'm not going to be able to live the rest of my life with this kind of income. Yeah. And so, so there's a lot of mental health stuff that people need to get over first. And I think that keeps them probably from your door as well. Like, I'm not somebody who has a financial planner. That's not who I am. That's not the kind of income I have. So how would you, or what would you say to somebody like that? That's thinking like, I don't know what I'm doing, but also I'm not sure I'm the kind of person that should have somebody else doing it for me.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so interesting, just to back up a sec, like when you talk about the message you took away from your growing up situation. Yeah. I've talked to lots of women who have siblings, grew up in the same household, same situation, and took away very different lessons. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like one's the spender, one's the saver, both because, well, we might not have it in the future, so got to squirrel it away. 100%. Or why not spend it while we can? Right? So there's not a one-to-one correlation. And I think it's interesting and worthwhile. I'm not a therapist. There are financial therapists. They are fabulous. It's a whole field, right? And it's worth just asking the questions and trying to surface what are some of those scripts or that narrative that's running in your head on autopilot. It's subconscious, so much of it. But if we can start to realize what's going on, we might be like, I'm starting to do that panicky thing I do, which really applied back when I was a kid. And I don't know that it applies so much anymore, right? You can make a different decision if you're aware of what you're telling yourself. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Of your story and of your, of your reasons for it. So to your question of someone who feels like maybe they don't need a professional, that's completely possible that you don't need a professional. I believe the first thing you should do when you're thinking about some type of financial professional is, what is the thing I would like this person to help me do? What's the thing I'm hoping they can do for me? I'm hoping they can help me figure out how to save some money on taxes and do my tax return. Okay, that's a certain kind of professional. I know I should have this
I've got this money from an old retirement plan from work and it should be invested and I don't want to figure out how to do it. I want someone to invest it for me. Okay, that's a different thing. And then there's like, you know what? I would really like to retire in about 12 years, but I'm not sure I'm on track and I'm not sure I'm putting my money in the right buckets to really set myself up for that. I'd love for someone to give me some second opinions on what I'm doing. Okay. That in my lingo is like a financial planner as opposed to an investment manager. And then there's different, kind of models and different ways of engaging with someone. It could be a one-time, it could be a project-based, it could be ongoing. Like, just because you've met one financial advisor, you've met one financial advisor. Because we operate all different ways. We have different service models, different ways of charging. And I don't think people know that. Like, people out there in the real world don't really realize that there's lots of different ways of doing what I do for a living.
Super wealthy people. They are, the regular old middle-class folks need somebody to help them with their future. Yeah. Especially now, I started my life as a teacher, and it used to be you got a job as a teacher and you had this pension that lasted for the rest of your life and you were set. And that did not happen when I remember very clearly getting a job. And one of the very first things at new teacher orientation was, here's the information about your 403B, which for those of you listening, that's a 401k for public sector, nonprofits. And this is going to be your retirement. So you should go find somebody to help you figure out what to do with it. Was literally the advice the guy gave us. It's like, your pension is nothing. They've rewritten it all in this state so that you're not going to get, I think we got like 1% or something went into our pension every paycheck.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. So, and I remember, 22-year-old me sitting there thinking like, I don't need to worry about retirement, whatever. This money, I guess money goes in here, just not really paying attention to it at all.
Sure.
So I feel like more and more, at least I'm Gen X even, but Gen X and below are like that now. Whereas our parents, they had these pensions, they had these retirement plans that were baked into their jobs, and none of us have that. And so women our age are like, oh, what do we do now?
It's a brave new world, or not so brave, right? But like, we've got to manage it on our own. It's like self-checkout at the grocery store. It's self-everything now. Like, you've got to figure it out yourself, which sucks. And I mean, that's another reason we don't really know it, because our parents had a different situation, most of them. And our grandparents certainly had a different situation.
For sure. Yeah. And even if they were able to build some kind of wealth, that's usually when they employed a professional, when it was this sort of wealth building rather than just like living on your retirement or figuring out your life after retirement.
Right.
So, So to that end, what services can people come to professionals for? And how do you know whether you need it or not, meaning like you can do it on your own? Well, maybe you can do it on your own, but that you're not sort of signing on for more than you need or getting taken advantage of because I know that's a fear of a lot of people too.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to ask a lot of questions, right? Number one, ask the professional, how do you get paid?
Okay.
And that feels like a rude question, right? Because again, we're not supposed to talk about money. So to ask someone face to face, like, how do you get paid?
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't ask your neighbor that, really, right? Like, you might ask what they do for work, but it's important in the financial advisor world because there's lots of different ways to get paid.
Yes.
When I say lots of, there's several, right? One is, from selling products. And that was kind of, in the older days, that was kind of the only model, is you got paid on a commission on selling a product, whether it was an insurance product, an annuity product, a financial, like a mutual fund type of product, right? There was a commission. So, in that case, they weren't really going to spend a lot of time giving you advice on how much you should save for retirement. They wanted to sell you something.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Like, put as much money as you possibly can into this thing. I'm oversimplifying, of course.
No, but that's great.
Right? And
that's what we need.
There are still people who sell products in the world, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
You just want to know when you're going into it.
Yeah.
Like, if they say they're a financial planner and they're going to come up with a whole financial plan, but the only way they get paid is on selling product, it's like the makeover at the department store they used to do for you, the free
Yes.
makeover, but they were really
Yeah.
wanted you to buy the $50 lipstick and the $40 mascara, and
Yes. And
you
only
sometimes felt
theirs, because
guilty.
that was the best one.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course, right? So if someone's offering you a free plan, ask the questions. Okay,
Right,
this is
right.
free, and you're going to spend time on it for me, and how do you get paid?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's good, ethical, wonderful people in all different models.
Sure.
And there's people who, maybe have ulterior motives going on and maybe not your best interest at heart in all different models, right?
Yeah.
So there's no one model that's the best or the worst, in my opinion. But you want to ask, what are the services that you're going to provide to me? And again, I think that's maybe not an obvious question in the financial advisor world. People kind of assume, they're just going to invest my money.
Right.
That's not always the whole picture.
Yeah. So what are the models? Like, generally speaking, what are the things that we might be looking at if we call and ask somebody for, or before we even get there, when we're looking to see who we should call?
Right. So one of the problems is that we can all call ourselves anything we want.
Yeah.
I can call myself financial advisor, financial planner, wealth manager, queen of the universe. Like, there's not really any regulation on what we call ourselves and what we do. So that's not a really good indicator.
Okay.
Some people are called vice president.
Yeah.
They tell you what they do.
Yeah.
Right? It's for a bigger firm. So what are the models? I mean, I am financial planning. So I will charge people for time to do the financial planning. I mean, answering those questions, like, I just inherited $200,000 from Aunt Millie, and I've got student loans, and I've got mortgage, and I want to save for retirement. Where should I put it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's dive into that and talk about it. There's no product sales. There's no investment recommendation. We're just talking about that question, right? And
and that's really broad too, of like, where do I put it? It could be like pay off your student loan or do something.
Totally.
Like, that's bigger than just where do I invest? It's what do I do with this at all?
Yeah. Buy that in, that rental property you've been thinking about, or take that family cruise, or, whatever. There could be lots of different options, right?
And that's where like you would talk about the person's goals and what they're wanting to do and so that really is truly like a life plan almost with this money that they either have just come into or that they're wondering what to do with this salary that they make or bonuses or whatever. Yeah.
I would say, right? Because money is just a tool. Mm-hmm. It's a means to an end. What do you want this money to do for you? Yeah. I'm asking people that all the time. All right. I really want to honor Aunt Millie and do something that she would think highly of. Like, maybe I'll go back and get my master's degree because she loved education. Awesome. And, by the way, you've got this 22% credit card debt. Maybe use a little bit to clear up the debt. Like, we would look at the whole picture. Yep. And that's kind of like on an hourly fee type of basis, right? A consultation, a plan. There are definitely people who charge that way and work that way. They sometimes are harder to find, but they exist.
Are they more often on their own, or are they more often at a Merrill or a bank or somewhere? Like, are they? They're
probably more often on their own because they can kind of then decide what business model they want to follow.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Some people attached to a giant name, I don't want to speak. I'm not speaking ill of anyone. I'm just saying, like, there are incentive structures, and there are maybe quotas or goals. Sales goal, not sales goals, but growth goals.
Yeah.
So they may or may not be allowed to do the hourly planning, right? Yeah. Some companies are set up to do that. There's lots of regulation. We have to do all kinds of filings. They might not be able to do things that way.
Yeah. Or if they do, it's typically, at least this has been my experience, because I get offers all the time from the investment arm of the bank where my money is.
Yeah.
And they will sit with you for an hour, but the end goal for them is usually to get your money invested somewhere. So it isn't strictly a financial plan for what's best for you. And it might be, but it's not necessarily, that's not the end goal of that, of that situation. Yeah.
One question to ask, and it's still imperfect, but you can ask, are you a fiduciary?
Okay.
Which means there are different ways that financial advisors are regulated. Some of us are held to a fiduciary standard, which is like the standard of trustees. Like they must act in your best interest. before
Got
their
it.
own interest, a fiduciary
Okay.
by the letter of the law. Now, Bernie Madoff, who you may or may not remember, he was a fiduciary,
Right. Nothing's
right?
a guarantee. Yeah.
He was also a crook. So,
Yeah.
but many of us are regulated as fiduciaries. And then people who are not are regulated on the suitability standard.
Okay.
So they just have to prove to the regulators, if they come knocking on the door and do an audit, they just have to prove that the product or the advice was suitable for your situation,
Okay.
which is a lower level of legal standard.
Sure.
So, I mean, that's another question that you can ask.
Okay.
But a lot of financial advisors get paid by the money they manage for you, assets under management. So if you invest $10,000 with them, they get paid less than if you invest $100,000 with them, and less than if you invest $1 million with them.
Yeah.
And some only work with people with $1 million or more, or $500,000 or more, right? They have minimums. That's the lingo.
Sure.
So you want to ask, right? Like, if you only get paid if the advisor only gets paid on investments, do you have a minimum? Right? Where do I stack up among your other clients?
Right.
Am I a small fish? Am I a big fish? Right? Like, those are important things to understand too.
And is there one that's, again, this is a very general question, but do you want to be either of those things, the small or the big? Or do you want to, like, is there one that's going to get you better service? Let's put it that way.
I don't know that there's a blanket statement, right? Like, I think the things you want to get out of working with a professional to align with the things they actually do, right? Like, if you're hoping someone will advise you on, how best to deal with your debt, and they're an investment manager, they might not be equipped to talk about debt or to talk about tax strategies or talk about, how to save for college for your kids. Like, they might not have all that. They might just be picking stocks and picking, different investment allocations.
Okay.
So you want to try to align that. And then a lot of advisors get paid on having an ongoing relationship, but maybe you just want a few hours of advice here and there.
Sure.
And you do the other stuff yourself. So then you're looking for an hourly person.
Okay.
I don't know that there's a blanket. Do you want to be the biggest or the smallest? I mean, at the end of the day, you want to feel really comfortable with that person.
Yeah. That's
you can ask your questions and not feel stupid, not be made to feel stupid.
Yeah.
You can admit, like, oh my gosh, my adult child is really struggling and we're going to need to support them. And, I've had clients with all kinds of kid struggles, and you don't want to feel embarrassed to tell the person what the struggle might be, right?
Yeah.
Like, you want to feel super comfortable that you're not going to be judged by that person.
Yeah.
Or
it's interesting because it feels very much like the therapeutic relationship. Like, there's this, because I was going to ask the question, do you have to disclose that? If somebody comes to you and you're an investment person and they want to talk about debt, if that were a therapy situation, it's incumbent upon the therapist to disclose, oh, this isn't my area of specialty. Let me help you find someone else. They don't all do it, but we're expected to. But that doesn't mean they all do. So in the same vein, I was going to ask, is it expected of financial professionals to say, "Ooh, this isn't really my area. Why don't I send you this way?" No, it's not even expected.
I don't think so. And very often, right, they're paid based on how many clients or how many assets they get. So the interest in say, "Sure, I can help you."
Yeah.
Again, that's the self-interest. But like,
right.
Yeah, I don't think there's a requirement that we are supposed to do that.
Okay. But just like the therapeutic relationship, you often have a gut feeling of this person is or isn't going to work for me. And so it sounds like similarly, if you feel like, okay, this person really does seem interested in my needs, situation, wants, all of it, you kind of get that from the meeting, if you will. Right. Yeah, it's almost more important than knowing their credentials or their area of expertise is, does this feel like this person, I can trust this person? Yeah.
And am I going to work with this person after the initial conversation, or am I going to be passed off onto the B team or the C team? Right. That happens sometimes.
And is that a question you can ask?
I think so.
Okay. And what would you say for that type of, like, can you just straight up ask, am I going to keep working with you? Okay.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Who will I be seeing when we meet regular basis, or when I call in, who am I going to talk to? Like, I have a team of 5 people. Oh, you're going to talk to Fran for your account issues, and, Terry for paperwork, and Janice on taxes, and me on, planning, Kevin on investments. Like, I think that's a fair question to ask.
Okay. Yeah. And is that something it sounds like you just answered it as if you would answer it. Is that something you do? You kind of explain who's your person for each thing? And
I mean, in our situation, again, we're small, like I'm going to be the lead person. Anything can come to me, but you can call anybody you get and they'll, know to direct you. And I want all clients to know everybody on the team.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that if I'm on vacation and Fran answers the phone, they're not going to be like,
they're not disappointed.
Right?
Yeah. That's fun. Yeah. It's like seeing a doctor in a practice of many.
Right.
Like you want to be familiar with everybody a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. Like my kid's pediatrician, right? It was a group practice and I had my two favorites, but I didn't always get to see them.
Yeah. Exactly. So as far as a woman of a certain age, if you will, who is fine, who finds herself on her own, whether it's a loss or whether it's a divorce or whether it's, her financial situation's changed. And look, in the best case scenario, she's gotten some money, but that's not always the case. And so is there sort of a first step or where should you go? What should you do kind of thing to take best care of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sadly, to go with our what we've been talking about up to now, like there are people who are, professionals, quote unquote, who are out there trolling for people who have been, had some kind of transition. So feel free to say no and no thank you to anybody and everybody, especially when you're in the most emotional period of time. Yeah. Because there sadly are people who prey on folks in vulnerable situations, as we know, right? That said, I think, in some sense, when you can get to the point of thinking, oh, now I get to make the decisions on my own. Mm-hmm. I don't have to check with anybody else. I don't have to compromise or collaborate or confer with anyone, right? For sure. What is it that I want my life to look like now? And I'm not saying you could go move into a castle if you're in limited resources, but there's always decisions that you can make. And, okay, maybe I'm going to have to downsize my living arrangement. Would I rather live in a city or would I rather live in a rural situation? Right? Like, I think it's worth taking time, and you're not going to know the answers right off the top of your head, maybe. Sure. But taking time to try to figure out which things are most important to you, which factors. Like, I want to make sure I'm close to my kids, or I want to make sure I'm close to the ocean or a river or a lake, or, I don't know. It could be anything, right? Yeah. Like, because the money, however much or little there is, it's supposed to serve you. So trying to get as clear as possible, and it's okay if it changes, right? You can make today's decision and then adjust down the road. But like, what is it that you would like most? And then figure out how your financial situation could support that. I don't know if you know Danielle Laporte. Have you heard of her?
Yes. Very.
She talks about having your core desired feelings.
Yeah. Yes.
So I like that idea. Instead of, I want a house at the beach.
Yeah. Why?
I want to be able to feel the sunshine on my skin several mornings a week. And I want to be able to create memories with my kids or my grandkids. Okay. Yeah. We can do that at all different price points.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not the thing so much as like, what is it you want to be able to feel in your life on a regular basis, and then work backwards from there on how you can put it into place. It always starts without the money. It never starts with the money.
Yes. But you said something so important there, which is I think that you have time. You don't have to make those decisions as soon as the alimony hits the bank account or the whatever settlement hits the bank account. I think that I see that a lot, that there's this like frantic feeling like if I don't hurry up and make the exact right decisions, then I don't know how I'm going to live the rest of my life. And it sounds like what you're saying is take a little bit of space, sock it away somewhere if you need to, but and it doesn't always, the other thing is it doesn't always come very quickly. So if you're talking about either, I guess, a divorce or any kind of life insurance or anything like that, it's not always quick that it, hits the bank account. Yeah. So, take some time even before the money comes to think about what's next for me and how do I want it to feel and look and all of those things.
Yeah. And if that's, taking some walks with your best friend or talking to a therapist or someone to help you think that stuff through too, because it can be very difficult to figure it out on your own. Even just me becoming an empty nester, I'm like, wait, I have time now.
Exactly.
What do I want to do with it? Wait, I can choose. I'm not used to that.
Yes. Yes. And then, and the feelings of doing it are also really uncomfortable too. Sometimes that like, oh wait, I just chose to do nothing.
Yep.
And I'm not sure I'm allowed to do that. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a, yeah.
Yeah. So I think support is, underrated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of us have been brought up to think we have to be self-sufficient and we've got to figure this out on our own. And it's okay to sit in the not knowing for a while.
For sure. And I do feel like there's an added pressure for women to figure it all out too, because, we have to prove that we can do it and we're just as capable and all of those things. When in reality, we don't have a lot of the same resources or haven't been taught a lot of the same things. So we shouldn't have to do it all on our own. Yeah. And that doesn't equate to not being able to. It just means this is the way the world is. And we're all better off with some support.
Totally.
Yeah.
I do think it can be helpful to get a little professional financial help, though, especially like if alimony settlement or if it's a life insurance settlement, if it feels like a big number.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh my gosh, $500,000.
Yeah.
I should be able to afford A, B, C, and D.
Yeah.
But if you're 50 and you might live 40 more years, how much is it really? Like, what does it actually mean to your life? And that's something that the human brain is not good at, doing those projections. But we have software. We financial planners have software that can plug in the numbers and like, oh, that means I could reasonably take out this much per year and have it last hopefully as long as I do.
Yeah.
Or, those kinds of decisions, because it's really hard to take a big number like a lottery winner, right? Like most lottery winners end up spending it all down because it feels like such a big number.
Yeah.
But when you spread it out,
in 2 years.
Maybe it's right.
Yeah.
Professional athletes, all kinds of people. Like it's just in the way that our brain looks at numbers that we don't automatically translate that into what might be a sustainable income off of this pot of money.
Yes. Yeah. And then add in what I was talking about earlier with my own money story of like, well, no, you're supposed to just zero out the checking account. Like, why would you, if you're not used to ever having extra, then that feels like extra that you just kind of are supposed to. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So bring somebody in to help you. And I like the concept of that too. It's not just bringing in somebody to help you plan. It's literally looking at what does this money look like 10 years from now? Even if I don't do anything to it, I just stick it in a savings account.
Yes.
What does it look like? Yeah.
What could it enable?
Right. And then on top of that, you have the knowledge to be able to say, and if you did this with it, it looks like this. And if you did this with it, it looks like this. Yeah. Yeah.
If you know exactly what you'd like to do, right? All right. I want to, work 5 more years and then maybe, retire to a small place and open a bookshop or I don't know, whatever it might be.
That sounds lovely. Yeah.
Where should I be putting the money to do those things?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Then the financial professional also can maybe say like, here are the different tools that exist out there in the financial world. Maybe a combination of these 3. Yeah. This one will do this piece and that one will do that piece. And like, that's the other stuff that we're good at and that we understand.
Yeah. And that too doesn't have to be, and again, this is a personal story. I'm talking about, women of a certain age, but I didn't do it myself, but I have heard, when people decide to get married or decide to have a kid, or even in those, their early 20s, I always call them the really smart people. They went and did that then. They went in their 20s and said to a financial planner, this is what I want to look like at 50 or 60 or 70. And how do I do that? And that's, so this is not just reserved for those of us who are in some sort of midlife or transition or any of that. It could be transitions at any stage of your life. It's a great time to check in with somebody and say, here's what I want my finances to look like. Yeah.
I always remember a couple came in, they were pretty young, 2 women, and the one had just finished, veterinary school. So, she was going from basically living on loans to now having a decent income. And she's like, I want to figure it out now. Yeah. Because we all suffer from lifestyle inflation, right? Like our income goes up. Well, like you said, there's money in the bank. I can spend it as opposed to being intentional up front about like, ooh, okay, if I sock away 12% of this over here and then pay this much on my loans and then, you'll set yourself up long-term, right? Back to your question at the beginning about like doing the long-term thinking. Yes. How can you befriend yourself now, but also your future self and do something that she'll be excited about?
So let's talk a little bit about that, because is it ever too late for that? Again,
never.
I'm 50. Is it too late for me to come to you and say like, I haven't done this well up to now?
Absolutely never. Those are like the majority of my clients, right?
Yeah.
Either they've had a transition, or it's just that nagging sense of like, oh, I've been ignoring this for so long because it makes me uncomfortable. Maybe I should finally face it.
Yeah. Or like, I've just been living on this money to raise these kids and to put them here and do this and do that. And now I don't need to do that anymore. But also, I don't know what to do with this money now.
Yeah. That's exciting, right? Like, that's a perfect client. The ones where there's less options are the ones who come in and say, I'm retiring tomorrow. Like, okay. So then you're just working with what you got. As opposed to, I'd like to do something different in 8, 10, 12, 15 years.
Right.
Or even 6 years, right? Then we've got some time to maybe adjust where things are, or put some things into place and think ahead.
But it sounds like even those that are tomorrow, it's not a totally lost cause. You've been able to kind of maneuver a little, and
right? Because there's these different pieces, and a lot of people. I had one client that we met with last week. Like, she was very good. She signed up for whatever work offered her, and so she's got money in different pots, but she doesn't really understand how they work and when she should pull on one, one versus the other, and what they each do. So, we can help figure that out.
Yeah. That's good. How about this is completely out of left field, but I have one in my house. So I'm asking for, new adults. Like, I have a kid that's about to be a senior in college.
Woo-hoo.
And, I'm her mom, so she doesn't have a whole lot of money and knowledge. But your description of that client has me thinking that there's so many people out there, I bet, like that, who just said yes to all of the things their work offered, but they don't even really know what that means. So for somebody who's just coming out and being offered, hopefully being offered jobs with salaries and 401ks and all of that stuff, should they call and seek some advice on what to do?
They could, or there's, I have a friend who just came out with a great book called Your Best Financial Life, which is aimed at that audience.
Okay.
I'm forgetting your last name. Isn't that terrible? But Your Best Financial Life.
Your Best Financial Life. Good to know. It's going to be a graduation gift all over the place.
There you go.
Yeah.
There's some good podcasts out there. Like, I think at that age, there's a few basic things you can do to set yourself up, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you have a job that offers a retirement plan, yes and yes. Sign yourself up for that. Pick that fund that has the date closest to when you turn 65. Put your money in there and forget about it, right? Sign up your beneficiaries and just do it. And then if you can, I know it's really hard, but even just sock away a little bit in a nice savings account, where if something fun comes up, an unexpected opportunity. Ooh, my friends are all taking a trip to New Orleans. I'd like to go, but I've got no money in the bank.
Yes.
I could use a credit card. Ooh. Or, look, I saved up $400 over the past 6 months.
Yeah.
I can go. This is more realistic. Or also there's, the things that might go poorly, like the job disappears, which is no fun, but then you want to have a little money in the bank. Or, you have broke your ankle and you have a high deductible on your health insurance plan.
Sure. Yeah. Or you live in a town where you need a car and the car breaks down, or you need, there's a million little things that happen there's
things that happen all the time.
People out. Yeah.
Unexpected expenses. Like, we should expect the expenses. We just don't know what flavor they'll be this month. Like,
yes.
Shit's going to happen. Sorry if I don't know if I can curse, but
sure. I wouldn't know what to do if you didn't. Yeah.
At some point. So building up that little cushion, whether the opportunity fund, or some people call it the F-it fund, right? Like, if you have a jerk of a boss and you want to hightail it out of there, just do yourself a favor.
Yeah.
Don't
be stuck. Yeah. Don't be stuck.
I've been getting, my son just graduated college, and we get the credit card offers in the mail every day. I'm like, oh, all right, we're going to have the conversation, right?
Yeah.
Back when you and I graduated, they threw the card offers at us. I
didn't even have to graduate. Yeah, it was like walking out of campus as a freshman, for sure. I remember that. You got a free T-shirt, or you got a free duffel bag or something if you signed up. Yes.
Totally. Right?
Yes.
And nobody taught us how to use it, and that we would be paying, 18% interest or something. So
Yeah. That everything that you bought was going to cost 20% more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a good tool to have, but understand it and be smart about
how
you use it.
Yeah. Yeah, that I think may be the one lesson that my kids have taken from me, hopefully. And only they've taken it from my mistakes. So it's not like,
Yeah, that's okay.
yeah, exactly. If somebody else, if I can save another generation from it, then it was worth it. But, I could talk about this all day, as you can see, but I want to be respectful of your time. So is there anything else you feel like women out there need to know? I suppose men too, but women for sure need to know about their finances and their power to use them the way they need them.
Yeah, I would say that even if you're in a lovely marriage or partnership and your significant other takes care of this stuff, please take the steps to start to understand what you've got, where the different pieces are, why the decisions are made. The statistic I heard, I can't swear to it, but I heard 80% of men die married and 80% of women die single.
Oof.
So even if, you're not beset with divorce or some other tragedy, like chances are at some point in your life, you're going to have to do this stuff. So if you can start learning and getting more comfortable with it before it's a crisis and before you're in emotional overload, it's going to be a lot easier when things happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's
it's not
perfect.
as painful as you think. Maybe you can find a couple girlfriends and learn together.
Yeah. And there's things out there now for that. I know there's a women's investment group that I keep getting emails from, and that they just talk. It's almost like book club, but they're talking about investment opportunities. And so it is out there.
I've got a podcast. There's lots of fun podcasts out there. Like sometimes that's a less painful way to learn because it's just little snippets. And we always say, like, we don't expect you to remember all the details of this. Just know that Social Security is a good thing. And that when you get around your 60s, you got some choices to make.
Yeah.
That's all I expect people to remember, but at least, knowing some of those basics.
Yeah. And I think it's so great when they hear stuff too, myself included, because then I can go look more up if I need to. Like I heard this thing today on Stephanie's podcast, and now I want to go dig into it a little bit more. Yeah. So remind us again, what's the name of it? Where do we find you?
Take Back Retirement.
Okay, perfect.
Because when I was in college, we had the Take Back the Night marches against violence against women.
Yeah,
so that's
they still happen.
Gen X nod. Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
It's on all the podcast places or takebackretirement.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Stephanie. Anything else you want us to know? We can find you on the podcast. We can find you online.
Yes. And just, take heart, right? Like, don't feel distraught about this. It's never too late. You can learn in little snippets and just be brave and ask the questions. I'll tell you one last story. I met this woman. She was, I think, 74. She had been widowed and then remarried. And she brought me, I was teaching like a kind of class at a local community center. She brought me this big financial packet at the break. And she said, "Can you look at this for me?" So I looked at it. I was like, "Oh, okay." It was a financial product her financial advisor had sold her. And I said, "Why did your advisor think this was a good idea for you?" And she said, "Oh, I don't know." She never asked any questions.
Yeah.
She just did what he said.
Yeah.
Right? Like, ask the questions. If it's feeling uncomfortable, if you're feeling pressured, back off, ask the questions.
I think that's a great message and a great way to end, because I think one of the biggest problems is this distrust of the whole profession. So what I'm hearing from you, though, is that most people in this profession are trustworthy, and you should know what you need to know in order to go in. Not how to do it or what to do with it, but what feels okay to you. And don't be afraid to ask for that. You have every right to ask for that.
Yep. And what you're hoping to get out of it, right? If you want a certain type of advice and the person doesn't give it, look around, shop around. It's easier now, too. A lot of my clients I have never met in person, right? They're all over the country. You don't have to find just a local person anymore.
Well, thank you so much. And I will send everybody to this, myself included, to your best financial life. So this is great information. Thank you so much.